Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Matt Slater, Town Supervisor for the Town of Yorktown. This is an informational meeting on the long-awaited Hallock Mills Sewer Extension Project. We can clap for that. That's okay. This is all good. This is all good. Joined by Deputy Supervisor Councilman Tom Diana, joined by Councilman Sergio Esposito, joined by our Town Clerk Diana Quast. I do want to make a point that this was noticed that a quorum of the town board would be present here tonight, so just wanted to make that point of information. You're going to be hearing directly from our town engineer, Dan Ciarcia, about the specifics of the project. We also have Will Batista here as well from our engineering department, who's going to be able to help answer questions. And I also want to thank our Parks and Rec Superintendent, Jim Moderano, as always, for helping us out here. This is, again, a very positive meeting. Let's start with that. So we have no bad news to share, okay? Only good news. The good news is that we finally, working diligently with Westchester County, have a hard and written commitment for $10 million from the East of Hudson funds. In addition to that, thanks to Congressman Mundair Jones, he was able to secure an additional $1.2 million for this project. I think it may be the first time that the town of Yorktown was ever written into a piece of legislation that was signed by the President of the United States. But that is lined out in the bill itself. And so really what's happened here, a couple things. When I came into office in 2020, you had all just finished your petition process. I told many of you that I would not, and I had no intention of restarting that petition process. I felt very close to a great product, a product that many of you have been waiting for 15, 20, 30 years. I see maybe even more. And so it just, for me personally, I didn't feel that it was, I felt it was very important from the town's perspective to continue the work that had already been done. And what you're going to hear tonight is things you already know, because it's genuinely the same project that you all signed a petition for in 2019. The difference being, we did and do still need to go to the state comptroller, and Dan's going to explain this to you. The state comptroller still needs to approve the cost. And before we could send the application to the state comptroller, we needed in writing that commitment of the $10 million from the East of Hudson funds from the county. Now that we have it, it's green lights, all engines are a go, and we wanted to just once again reintroduce but also remind you all about the project, the scope of the project. We are very excited, and we believe that we're going to have a very successful project based on the information that we have. But we just wanted to once again re-present it to all of you, just to refresh your memories. I know it's been 2 years since we gathered over in the senior nutrition center. I was in those meetings as well. But I did think, and so did our town board and our town clerk, think it was important that we gather once again to go over the specifics of the project. And I don't want to take too much away from Dan, so I'm going to thank our town engineer, Dan Ciarcia, and welcome to the podium so he can present to all of you. As Dan's coming to the podium, I do want to remind all of you, we have been keeping a live timeline on the town's website. So if you go to the Engineering and Sewer Department on yorktownny.org, you'll be able to see a basic timeline of all the things that have been transpiring since this whole project started and what's been happening in the last 2 years as we've worked towards getting these dollars really solidified so that we can present it to the state comptroller. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our town engineer, Dan Ciarcia. Dan.
Thanks, Matt. We're sort of coming in the home stretch on a long odyssey here. Some people are happy it's happening, and what I'd like to do is kind of explain, just do a quick Sewer District 101, because generally people get confused about a sewer district, because you have sewer districts and you have sewer districts. So one of the sewer districts we have, which unfortunately has the same name, is called Hallock's Mill. And Hallock's Mill was established back in, originally in the 1960s, and the purpose of it was to build a wastewater treatment plant that was big enough. So some of the properties, I think all of the properties that are represented here, whether you're a new owner, you may not know it, but you were paying Hallock's Mill tax so that wastewater treatment plant would be big enough when and if you could ever connect to it. We've done more upgrades, but what's since happened is only people who are connected to the plant are paying off the principal and interest associated with those improvements. Then you have the Hallock Sewer District, the one we're talking about tonight, which is what's called the lateral sewer district. And this is sort of part two of this, which this was done in many areas in town. And the town was built out really with two types of these lateral sewer districts. There's the ones that we call no-cost districts that are built by the developers. It's at no cost to the town. They put in the infrastructure. They convey it to us. And because the district exists then, we've now got the ability to repair those sewers, but those people don't pay the tax that we're here this evening to talk about. So the district we're talking about for this group is the one where we collect taxes to construct the sewers physically in front of your homes. So with the lateral sewer district, and this district stuff gets confusing, and unfortunately that's how town law works, is the districts are constrained. You pay taxes to the general fund, and that takes care of police and folks at town hall and recreation and things of that nature that everybody in the town benefits from. The other class of districts are these special districts where there's a discrete group of people who benefit from them. So people who are on wells, they don't pay to the Yorktown Water District. They got their own water. People on septics do not pay for a lateral sewer district. So the folks here this evening fall into that class of people who have septics who would now be paying a tax which they presently don't pay. So we started this back in 2018 to look at the feasibility of doing this, and they cast a fairly wide net and came up with quite a few parcels. Prior to me coming on board with the town, that list kind of got distilled down to 315 parcels, and subsequent to that, we did a deep dive to look at parcels. We found parcels that had been merged. They were, I think we found some parkland that somehow got accidentally in the mix. We found, people who either were already connected or had a sewer lateral provided. So the list now that's at 310 properties, we believe is fairly accurate. But, as we get deeper into this, we'll learn more, I'm sure. So once that was done, where we kind of got a sense who wanted in, who wanted out, the town prepared what's called a map plan and report. And this is just part of the whole dance we have to go through to establish a special district. The map plan and report basically part of like creating these maps where we look at who's going to get the sewers, where they're going to run, how much is it going to cost, because ultimately when folks sign the petition, we got to lay out the deal. And the purpose of creating the map plan report is to describe the deal, which is, this is what you're going to get, this is how much your taxes are going to go up, this is how much it's going to cost if you connect, this is, just laying out what it is you're getting. Once we've disclosed to everybody what the deal is, then we can have these meetings, but get opinions whether people want to get in the sewer district or not. But the way the statute reads that dictates all this is we got to tell you what the deal is, and then you sign a petition saying, I'm familiar with the deal, that I'm on board. So we achieved that milestone at the end of 2019, that we got enough petitions signed by resident property owners that got us over the majority of technically they refer to it as the resident owners. So in other words, commercial properties and people who rent don't have the ability to sign the petition. But so we've gotten to that threshold. So the main points are that the estimate came in at $14.3 million. As Matt described, we were kind of in limbo because we couldn't really establish the sewer district until we had a firm commitment on the $10 million, because without it, the project, establishing the district wouldn't be viable. And we couldn't move forward because that's the deal we represented to everybody, that the price you'd be paying was predicated on us getting the $10 million. So we also got the Mondaire Jones money, which further impacted that. To some extent, we had some increases because the county wanted us to pay for what's called the low-pressure sewers, which I'll get to in a minute, and also, you know, the reality is prices have gone up some since we embarked on this. So the Mondaire Jones money will hopefully offset that. So really we're looking at serving people in three different ways. The optimal way is we run a pipe up to your property line, 4-inch diameter PVC pipe that you can connect to by gravity. And that's the most desirable scenario. Some people, if their property is too low, we might not be able to achieve that, and they may have to put in a pump to get to the pipe we leave at the street. And the final category is in some neighborhoods we're proposing what's called a low-pressure sewer. And what that is we put in a pipe that we can't achieve good pitch. So the pipe can basically go up and down. It's under pressure, and everybody along it basically has a tap, almost like a water shut-off, that there'll be a valve at the property corner, and there'll be a pump unit that the town will supply that gets installed, and that'll be your point of connection. So instead of having a gravity line at your property line, you'll basically have an 1.25-inch force main connected to this pump unit, which in turn will be able to take a 4-inch pipe coming out of your house. So that's our desire, or you know, those are the three flavors. Our desire is to get as many people by gravity, but that'll ultimately become a detail on how this happens, because we can't expend the funds to really do the heavy lifting that's required to detail the design of this, which is figuring out where everybody's plumbing outlet is, how deep is it, can we put the pipe in the street deep enough to achieve that? And that's the sort of granular information we'll get to once we have the money to hire a consultant to do that work. So that doesn't happen until the district's established. Once it's established, that's the first thing we need to do, is get a consultant on board to do that. So I know a lot of the questions we're hearing are sort of those kind of detailed questions, which we don't have the answers to. You know, and that's basically why we're here tonight. We're coming in the last yard. Procedurally, the last thing we have to do is we're having a public hearing next week, which is technically the hearing to establish the district. It's sort of the last procedural step in fulfilling all the requirements of the law that dictates doing this. Once that's all done, our town clerk, Diana Quast, will put it all together and send it up to Albany, to the Office of the State Controller, and hopefully we got all our I's dotted and T's crossed. They in all likelihood, will come back to us asking for further information or questions, and once we get that approval from them, then we can move forward with the project. So that's basically the four corners of where we are and what we're doing. And the way I was thinking we could handle this, Matt, is to maybe do some questions and answers now, just more on the big picture stuff. And then if somebody has a question, particularly about their property, unless it's a global sort of question, after we finish the formal part of the presentation, Will and myself will break out and we'll look at the maps with you, and hopefully answer some detailed questions you have. So,
do you want to just remind everyone why we have to go to the comptroller's office?
If the district was the cost we came up with was less, there's a threshold where you don't have to go to Albany to get the approval. But we're above that, so the law requires that we obtain their approval. So that's why we're going through this process, and this is the final step.
Before the application gets pushed off.
Right. Well, tonight's not the final step. The final step is Tuesday night. That hearing on the establishing the district's the final step. So,
Are you here Tuesday night to vote or just the town?
no, in a sense, all what's really happened is by virtue of you signing the petition, you made your feelings known on it. If somebody wanted to object or had some issue with what we were doing, there would be a forum where they could bring that up. But at this point, if you're in favor of it and you're good to go, there's no need to show up Tuesday night.
And the town board would be the voting body in establishing the district.
Right.
And so we decided, to have this meeting for all of you guys, so this way if you had any questions, general questions, we would get them out of the way now, and, it's a little more personal this way.
Other questions for Dan?
What percentage of the 310 parcels will require pumps? Any idea?
There's a number, I think it was on the order, and you know what, because we're broadcasting, let me repeat the question. The gentleman asked how many properties will require pumps, and I actually have that answer. It might be in there, I think it is in the bullet points here. And it's really not exact because we sort of, this is on the consultant's best guess on how many. I believe, I thought it was about 40% were either going to be on low pressure or...
It was all the Sparkle Lake that was going to be on.
Yeah, all the Sparkle Lake area. We want to definitely look at some alternatives over there to avoid that. That's obviously gravity will be our preferred alternative, but I believe it was on the order of 40% of the properties. Keep looking for that.
You said it would be about 40%? 40%, but that's an approximation. It's a fairly good estimate, but once you get into the weeds with all of that stuff and construction starts to happen, you don't know. That's what Dan's trying to do.
One of the big issues we're going to look at is the whole Sparkle Lake area is on these low pressure sewer pumps, which everybody would have one. We think we can eliminate a lot of them if we can get a state wetlands permit to go the other way, to go out toward Alton Road. But that's sort of the detailed kind of issue we would get into once we had the district established and could bring the consultant on board.
Can we get an estimate on what it would cost to put a pump in?
But there's two different. I'm sorry. The question is how much would it cost to put the pump in? The price that was in the original report had it at about $15,000. But hear me out. So that became an issue. So what we're doing is the people who require pumps will essentially end up in the same place, and that the town will put the pumps in, and they'll be provided with a 4-inch connection to that pump, similar to what the people who are getting gravity sewers would have. So that will be on the town's dime to supply the pump and install it. So that it won't be as much. It'll be more in line with the hookup cost, for the typical people on gravity. Because in the end, you will have to do the electric, which is separate. But as far as the plumbing, it would basically be the same.
Okay. Round figure, I didn't hear it.
I guess, any of the connections.
Town's giving you the pump. You got a pump like the town's
All except you, Francis.
in?
All except for you.
I'd like that. You can always give it back. Now we got to see if the state, in its infinite wisdom, will go and help us at the other end. Because what we have in Albany now is not doing much help anybody.
So just to be clear, what Dan is saying is the idea is that the cost of a hookup to a home that would be gravity fed is going to be, we're trying to make it about the same cost if you have the hookup with a pump. Aside from the electric,
Yeah.
which you will have to provide on your own, am I right, Dan?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, aside from that, it's going to be approximately equal to what it would cost if it was a gravity fed.
And that is,
And that is,
Who maintains the,
it's going to depend on how the health department handles it. I think they will.
Can you repeat the question?
I get it.
Repeat the question.
The question was who's going to pay to maintain the pump. I believe the health department will require us to maintain the pumps. I'm not certain of that. I mean, obviously that becomes, and for that reason, I want to avoid those pumps as much as we can. So the detailed design, I'll be hammering the consultant to make sure we have as few low pressure pumps as possible. I mean, the thing that sort of comes in with all this is you like to give everybody a generic number, but there's so many different scenarios out there. Who's going to have rock? Whose driveway is steep? And even if we could put the pipe pretty low, they may, separate and apart from the low pressure sewers, they may require their own pump to get up to the street just because of the topography around their property. But our goal is to have as few pumps, whether these low pressure ones or individual pumps going up to a gravity sewer as much as we can. But at some point it becomes cost prohibitive because of the depth we'd have to put the sewer in the street to achieve that. So to the extent we can achieve it, we will. And until we get into the nitty-gritty of the design, we really won't know the answers to that.
What happens when there's power outages?
Well, the quick answer, not to be snarky about it, is don't use your water. I mean, you can put in, the health department will also require a storage tank, which would typically hold a day's worth of effluent. As an alternative, some people do, think it's a good idea once this happens to put in their own generator, but the storage tank would be there. And, depending on how long it goes, you may want to limit your water usage if it's a prolonged.
do these pumps require water?
No.
They're self-sufficient as far as in and out?
Yeah, no, I mean, your sewage goes into it, and then it gets pumped into our system, so it would just be providing power to it.
The way, I guess, the easiest way, I'm kind of intimately installing these, okay? So to give you a broad aspect, if you don't know.
Why don't you come on up, Tom?
I'm sorry, I didn't know I was going to steal Dan's thunder, just real quick. Just to give you a broad brushstroke idea on how these pumps work. They're what they call a macerating pump, if I'm not mistaken, right, Dan? There'll be a macerator type pump. So what the macerator type pump does is that when the toilet's flushed, it goes into the pump. It gets up to a certain level, and kind of like the sump pump in your house, if you happen to have one, we'll start with a similar like a float situation. And once it gets to that portion, it'll grind up whatever's there, and it will eject it out, for lack of a better word, like a sewer ejector pump. So prior to that, it would go into that holding tank that's there, and generally most homes now are, and correct me Dan if I'm wrong, about 1,000-gallon holding tank that would have to be installed, between 500 and 1,000.
Yeah, the health department usually wants to see about 1,000-gallon tank to store a day's worth of sewage, which 1,000 gallons is a lot. People, particularly if you gotta limit your water usage.
Especially if you consider that the people that use water on a general basis, you use about somewhere between 125 and 150 gallons of water a day, between flushing, washing dishes, et cetera, et cetera. So I've installed a lot of these pumps throughout the many years. They're very reliable. They work very well. Do they fail? Occasionally. But if you follow rules with them, you don't want to put steak bones down there and stuff like that. You don't put grease that just came out of your deep fryer down there. That messes them all up. There's certain criteria that you have to follow so that it does work properly. But like I said, I've done a number of these, doing a sewer main project now, and they work really well. So, yes. does the tank go in place of where where your septic tank is now, where your septic system is? The answer is yes. Where on the property, I'm not 100% sure, because everybody's property is different. But probably in that vicinity where it comes out of the house, it'll go into that tank. Then it goes to the pump-up system, or the pump system, and then goes out to the sewer.
And I have to ask then, if we're going to be taking the septic tank out and the fields out, what happens to those?
Your fields would remain.
Fields remain.
Okay, and let's say you have a 1,000-gallon tank there already.
Right.
That also could be utilized, unless the health department has changed that, Dan. In laws that say, like, if you have a good concrete septic tank, generally you can hook off of that and then go to sewer.
But the issue becomes is really how to do the piping, because if you're somebody that ends up having one of these low pressure pumps, they have very limited storage in them. I think they're about 150 gallons, if that much, and it's a plastic thing that goes in the ground. They're about probably like 4 feet in diameter. They got placed in the ground. The catch is that you got to set this up so if you lose power and they fill up beyond their storage capacity, you don't want it backing up into the house. So then it's got to back up into the storage tank, and then in turn, when you set it up so that when power comes back on, it empties out the storage tank, that you don't have to make some kind of arrangement to pump it out. So in some cases, maybe the septic can be repurposed to do that, but that's something. Again, it's going to have to be every scenario we look at.
Just taking it one step further, if we were to remove the septic tank, if it was going to be reviewed, where does that go? How do you, I'm going to get rid of the septic tank?
Well, normally what happens is it gets pumped out, and you just smash it in place and bury it.
Yeah.
You have to fill it in?
Yes.
Yes.
You have to fill it in?
Yeah. It's and then another tank would have to be put elsewhere. So, as Dan says, it's on a case-by-case scenario on where that particular tank and/or pump-up system or pressure system, I should say, would have to go.
Where is the pump put? Is it above? Is it in the ground or in your house? Out on the street? Where's this pump going to sit?
That would be the berry pump, right?
Well, there's no one stock answer to that, because it depends on how we serve you. So if you can let's run through all the possible scenarios. We put a gravity 4-inch line at your property line. Your home, hopefully we can set it low enough that your plumber can pick it up where it goes out to the septic and run it right out to that gravity line. Another scenario would be, depending upon your home, it might make sense to turn, say for example, if you had a toilet in your bathroom and that was the only fixture, or a washing machine or a slop sink that doesn't get a whole lot of usage, you could change the plumbing so that your upstairs is fully gravity, goes out the front of your house, and then you put a small ejector inside your house just to take care of your basement stuff. So that's two different ways to deal with that. The gravity people, we may also have people that are so deep that they have to put in a pump. So that would again be on your property. It might make sense to put it behind the house, maybe even repurpose your septic tank, put a pump in there, and then you'd have to pump up to the gravity line. Now, separate apart from that, so just think of it as there's a pipe at the end of your property that makes the water go away. How we accomplish that, any one of those three scenarios can happen. Now, separate from that, the other type of pump we're talking about is what we call a low-pressure pump. And what the low-pressure pump does, instead of having a gravity pipe in front of your house, there's one pressurized pump that runs, line that runs down the whole street. So everybody's tapping into a pressurized line. and this pump device would go somewhere in the front of your house that the town would supply. So you'd end up in the same place that it could only go so deep. If your house, maybe you could put it in the back somewhere, but that leads to other issues if the town's in a position that where they have to maintain them. So again, there's a lot of different scenarios here, but I just want to make the distinction because it is confusing, because a pump isn't a pump. We've got pumps that are part of what's the town responsibility to provide you with sewer service versus the town providing you with gravity sewer service, and you have to do something else just because getting deep enough to service your property isn't practical.
And that pump would be on top of the ground?
The question was, will the pump be on top of the ground? All of these pumps would be underground. And I just found the answer to one of the previous questions. How many pumps are there going to be? The current layout that was used in the map plan report had about 160 parcels in the what we call the Birch sub area. There's 160, 60 of them are going to be on low pressure pumps. The Sparkle Lake, there were 69. All of them are on low pressure pumps right now. So we definitely want to impact that. And Sunrise Street required 11 low pressure pumps out of the 15 parcels. But again, we're going to endeavor to try and reduce the number of pumps that are in the mix here. We really want to try and do that to the best we can.
Is just 1 second. The pump is usually in the tank, in the holding tank. Isn't that accurate, or
In
is
its
it not?
own holding tank.
In its own holding tank.
Right, but there might be a scenario like I described where you have like your washing machines down the basement and your plumbing went through your basement slab and your basement slab's too low to get my gravity out to the street. So the decision you may want to make is to say, you know what, I only got one fixture down the basement. Let me get all of my house to work my gravity so, that if there is a power failure that I've got gravity serving the majority of my house. If I got a power failure, I know my pump in the basement that I put in the floor, most likely, don't do the wash on the day you don't have, well, you're not doing the wash anyway, obviously, but.
That's if you're on gravity. If your house is going to be on a pressured sewer, then, which is I think what, we're talking either gravity or pressure, and then I understand that there might be scenarios if you have something in the basement, you might have to have an ejector pump. That's separate than the pump, the grinder pump that we're talking about now.
Right.
So the grinder pump, which is going to be hooked up to the pressured sewer line, in that scenario, which is I think what we're talking about, and I think where the questions are being generated, that pump would be in the holding tank because it would have to grind up the sewage.
Right,
So
it's actually a pack. Sergio's asking me about what this pump is going to look like. It's basically probably about, the typical one would be about 6 feet tall, I think about 3 feet in diameter, and all you would see is a lid in, say, your front lawn. But the pump sits in that. Now, separate and apart from that, the health department, as of late, has been requiring us to have a holding tank for the very reason we're talking about. And that holding tank would have to be designed in a way that the water doesn't back up to your house, but also when power is restored, nobody has to pump out the holding tank. And once power is restored, it empties the normal pump, wet well, holding tank, as well as the emergency storage tank will all get emptied out. And maybe what we should do is put some details on how that would be accomplished.
What if a washing machine goes into a dry well and it doesn't go into your septic?
Well, if you ask the health department, they would tell you you shouldn't be putting your washing machine in a dry well. But I would say if it ain't broke,
Pardon?
if it ain't broke, yeah,
No.
let's keep doing it. Yeah.
Okay.
Dave, question.
Yes.
You had mentioned earlier, and this goes to the point you're trying to make about the least amount of pumps, the best is best. You mentioned that say Sparkle Lake, where I live, which is all pumped up to Hyatt Street, but you think it still might be a possibility that it can run gravity feed down and run out the wetlands with a permit?
Well, the gentleman was asking about trying to eliminate some of these low-pressure pumps in the Sparkle Lake neighborhood where every property is being served in that way. We identified a town-owned piece which could provide some gravity flow down to the main line that runs down along the shoreline of Sparkle Lake, parallel to Hyatt Street. We're also going to have the consultant investigate the feasibility of running a gravity line along the west side of the end of all these streets. So we're going like that. The town already has the easements to get out from here all the way out to Grand Springs Road. They're in place and available to us, so if we can do that, we definitely want to do that. And that would be contingent upon the state allowing us to go into the wetland or I think it would be probably pretty much buffer over there, but until we go through the permitting process, it might involve us doing some type of wetland mitigation. But the town already has gone a long way over there in a number of projects, notably the Chelsea subdivision, Bridle Ridge, and Ponderosa. We assembled all these properties that's created this large green space that's generally state wetlands that goes all the way up to London Road. So hopefully, there'll be some consideration in that. And plus, what it does for us, we own all the land, so perhaps there's some wetlands enhancements or mitigation we can do on the land we already own to compensate for any disturbance associated with running a line in there. Because basically, once we're done, you're not going to, the area is going to restore itself pretty quickly. It won't, in a year's time, it'll look like we weren't even back there.
So, if that's a possibility, where in the process is this going to take to come into play? If you're a consultant, when does that happen?
The question is, when will we study that option? And this goes to having the district, which in turn provides us with the funds to begin to embark on doing the detailed design and eventually construction. So that would be a detailed design issue. But we're going to be, banging the drum with the consultant to stay any place we can avoid these pumps. Let's get rid of them. Let me get somebody who hasn't asked a question yet.
We're on the Sparkle Lake area also, so if the high street is higher and all the side streets go low. So what about even high streets? All has to be the grinder, not gravity, even if you're on Hyatt?
Again, it's going to be a detailed issue, but if we can make it work, we definitely want to make it work. Yes, because it does come up high. There's possibilities too. We could also look at other people along the east side of Hyatt. Maybe we could get an easement, or there's just a lot of details. But it goes back to the theme here is if we can eliminate pumps, we are going to eliminate pumps any way we can. Yes, sir.
So basically, the homeowner is responsible for everything up to the hookup to the street, and if it requires a pump, the town will supply that pump.
The question is about the town's responsibility on the hookups, and the nuance of this, Pat, is there's two different types of pumps. There's the one that the town's going to be obliged to provide, and that's going to be in the scenario where we don't have a gravity pipe in the street. So in that scenario, we're providing the pump, and then you hook into it. Separate and apart from that, we may not be able to, on areas where we have a gravity sewer, it may not be practical for us to put it deep enough to serve a home by gravity. We'll make every effort to do that, but in some cases, like the scenario of somebody putting something down the basement just to handle the basement stuff and taking care of their upstairs in a different manner, or it may be just more convenient if the property pitches down and just put it in their backyard and just pick up the pipe right where it comes in.
But I'm talking about the basic pipe that's coming from the street to the homeowner's house. We're responsible for that, other than the pump system if there's a pump involved.
We will provide a pipe right up to your property line.
So you will provide the pipe to the property, but say the sewage in my house is in the back of the house. So that means we have to go back, out, down. The homeowner supplies that.
If we can go bring we're going to go around and do surveys of the property, determine where the plumbing outlets are. And that's part of the exercise we go through to figure out how deep the line in the street should be. If we determine, we'd love to help Pat out, but we got to put the pipe in the street 20 feet down to help them out, that becomes impractical. That's a very expensive pipe to put in. And especially, you try and be fair about it, but if there's a scenario where you could handle your basement stuff with if there's not a lot of fixtures in there, handle some stuff in the basement, and then switch your plumbing around to go out the front, and then most of your house plumbing wouldn't need one. And that's sort of the sort of thing, talking to a plumber. And even we find, like, when we start building these things, people don't think about it too hard. And then once it's really starting to happen, they start to think, well, you know what, this will work. You were going to put the pipe on this side of my driveway. It makes more sense to put it here. I can save a tree. I got a walkway I don't want to cut up. I got, there's just a lot of nuance sometimes you learn about once you really get into the nitty-gritty. If you don't learn about the design phase, you can certainly get people's attention when you come down the street with the excavator, and they'll...
So I'm getting the feeling that the homeowner is going to put a good part of installing the pipe from the house to the street.
Well, installing the pipe, it's not the good part. We've always done it this way. Getting from the house to the street is always going to be the homeowner's responsibility.
That was
Yeah. The pumping part is, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm on 2813 Headwood. I'm 375 feet from the road, pitched at the back of my house. So I'm responsible for the pipe all the way up to the street. And there's two other houses with the same driveway, 300 plus feet of driveway.
You're the
2813 Headwood.
I spoke here.
I can't see that far.
I think I spoke to somebody else up there. Was that you I spoke to earlier? Yeah. We'll look at that. The other thing is that it isn't just one house. There's three houses sort of in the same boat there. So in doing our detailed design, we'll go back there, look at everybody's house back there, and perhaps we can run a gravity line up that common driveway if the people are willing to provide an easement.
What's the gravity line?
It would be like what's going in the street.
Our house we're pitched down, so it has to be pumped up, right?
Right, but you would have to run less pipe though.
So who pays for that pump to get it up?
In your case, you would have to pay for the pump.
Oh, that's good.
Then you got a question?
This
A
woman right
woman
here. Yep.
with her hand up.
I live on Bird Street, and there is already pipes on Bird Street for sewer. Where does this pump system comes in residents of Bird Street? Because this pump system sounds a little antiquated to me, like a third world country. Instead of having something more modern. Because I know people that have this pump system in Eurasia, and when this thing backs up, it is not pleasant. So what about those people that are close to these already established lines? And what is the size of the pipe?
There were some.
What is the size of the pipe that they require from homeowners' homes to that pipe that we're going to get hooked up into? You mentioned 4 inches. So is that going to be a standard 4 inches, or is the pipe going to be what you can afford with your plumber if we're going to be paying approximately $15,000?
Can you repeat the question again?
Okay, there's a lot of question there to repeat, but I'll try my best.
I'm so sorry, I've been living here since
No, I just have to repeat because people can't hear.
I'm so sorry for the question.
No, we appreciate your question.
I mean, I'll have to look where your home is. I mean, there's questions about some of the people on Birch Street. There are people on Birch, I believe, that are tapped into Gomer Street, and some of those people were connected with when subdivisions were built, that the developer was responsible for running those lines. So we'll look and see what they did. The pipes would be 4 inches. The individual sewer connections for gravity will be 4 inches. The low pressure system will be 1.25 inches, and then the line out in the street will be whatever size is necessary depending upon how many pumps are connected to it. The big lines that we put in the street will typically be 8 inches in diameter. Let's go on.
What's the timeline of the construction itself? We're shoveling the ground to pave the roads.
Best guess.
Well, at this point, we sort of have to go through the procedure, right? So we're going to go through a procedure where after Tuesday night, our package goes up to Albany. That's going to be up there for a while. There may be some back and forth about questions and so forth. But that'll be a process that probably we can figure is going to be like 6 months. So if we could hopefully early next year get a consultant on board, go through a procurement procedure with a consultant, get them on board, get them designing this thing, hopefully that would put us in a position we could actually, it might be optimistic to start at the end of 23, but spring of 24 would probably make sense, and it would probably, whether we do one contract or multiple contracts, probably go on for, I would think, 18 months to 2 years, working in different neighborhoods. No one neighborhood will be disrupted for 18 months. Yes?
Did you disclose again the amount of tax money that our crews have to pay for this? Maybe you've already said it, but repeat how much each owner, at this point, an estimate of how much our taxes will increase.
Sure. So the way it would work is the cost that once the district's established, the cost of the consultant, the cost of construction is all going to be borne by the special district. The town will issue municipal bonds for that purpose. So basically what the district will be doing is basically paying the principal and interest on those municipal bonds for a period of 30 years. That's our proposal. That right now that works out to just shy of $800 a year.
That's as of today. Is there something in writing we're going to have that's going to say, like, in 3 or 4 years when this finally comes to be, is that going to increase? I mean, is that set in stone? Like, is that going to
We're working off of the map plan and report because that was the basis for people signing the petition. We've since got additional monies. We're hoping to reduce the cost by eliminating pumps, and we're also seeking other funding sources. And it's impossible to predict, if the economy tanks, we may get great prices. There's a lot of variables involved, but until we get there, we don't know for sure. We may get more favorable interest rates on municipal bonds. There's a lot of moving pieces. We could go for a longer term. We could consider so there's a lot of things we can do, but right now that's our best estimate provided by our consultants of what this is going to cost, and based upon an interest rate, I think we assumed 4% on the municipal bonds gets you to that number.
Are you saying that each one of the residents in this whole thing would have an $800 bond for 30 years that they're going to pay on, or that's the town?
The question is everybody going to have a bond? And the answer to that is no. That the town will borrow the money. So we pay the principal and interest on the municipal bond, but that money is segregated. That's sort of like what a special district does. That money can't be commingled with the town funds. It's a separate pot of money. And what we do is, whatever the principal and interest is, it will be divided by the assessed valuation of the people in the special district. So based upon that, your pro rata share of the interest on what now is at $3.1 million would be approximately the $800 a year.
We would be paying
Right, you would see it as in your tax bill, just another line in your tax bill. You won't be billed separately for it or be on the, it isn't like you'd have a separate bill coming in from a bonding company or something. It would just be, that's how we do these special districts. The town borrows the money and then assesses the charges associated with the district on the people who are in the special district.
Regardless of whether they hook up or not?
The gentleman asked whether they're hooked up or not. I mean, the issue really is that you can't, when you do an improvement like this, you're never going to get there if one person objects and then another person is on board and another person objects, because you're putting that pipe in front of their home. They're getting the benefit whether they choose to use it or not. And, it may be that, and we've seen it happen a lot of times, somebody fought us tooth and nail and they decide to move out and the new owner couldn't be happier that there was a sewer there and even said, I wouldn't have bought the house if I couldn't hook up to a sewer. So, but the bottom line is if we're providing the improvement, it's there, we can't pick and choose because somebody doesn't want it. It's you gotta, we can trim off edges of districts. If 20 people on a street don't want it, we shorten the pipe by that instead of trying to fight over it. If they're unanimously opposed to it, we take them out. But if you're in the district, you'll pay whether you use it or not.
I believe Frank has a question.
Frank always has a question.
A couple of questions about the
Oh, you got a couple of questions.
reliability. One. Are they reliable?
Yes, they are. They're pretty reliable.
Lifespan.
I think the pumps generally are good for about 5 years.
How much?
About 5 years.
Okay, at the end of 5 years, who's responsible for cleaning out the pump? It has to be cleaned eventually, doesn't it?
Well, they either get rebuilt or replaced. They get rebuilt or replaced, the pumps. Typically, you don't have to clean anything out.
Okay, and then last question. What is the operating cost per year, electricity-wise?
I don't know the answer to that. The gentleman's asking about the operating cost of running the pump. It runs very infrequently, so I wouldn't think it's more than $50 a year if I had to guess. It's only going to run when you use water.
Just don't flush your toilet as much. It'll run a heck of a lot less, okay? Or put anything down the sink.
You may be laughing about electric costs now, but wait till next year.
That's right. No, you're right. And, fortunately, these pumps that I have installed have been very reliable.
Yeah.
We've put them in for years, and I have yet to gone back and done anything to it. Has a couple of them, a wire broke or something silly, or maybe a connection broke? Yes, but that happens. But that's generally on the outside, running to the house. You have to get an electrician to come in and fix that. But for the most part, they're very reliable, very durable. And there's not a lot of cleaning that has to be done unless somebody, like I stated before, puts the grease from the deep fryer down the sink or toilet bowl, and it congeals, and then it makes
Don't forget the wipes.
The wipes. Yes,
the
If you're on septic, you're already following a lot of the rules that you have to abide by.
For the most part.
For the most part.
Yeah.
So it's not, you're not changing, your kind of your lifestyle in that way. And Councilman Diana spoke about this earlier. That when you turn the water on, the pump doesn't just go on. Right, the tank has to get to a certain level. It has like a little floating device. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's like a floating.
And so when the water gets to a certain level, the pump trips on, gets the water out of there and whatever else is in there, and then shuts down. So it's infrequent, which is what Councilman Diana was
And it has an alarm system on it also. So if something should happen to that pump that it's not turning on, you'll know about it. It's an unrelentless screaming that it puts on so that you don't overflow and it doesn't do bad things to your lawn, or if it happened to be in the basement. Some of them you can put in the basement, but for the most part, they're out in the lawn.
And just an aside to that, what we've seen in other installations, these pumps are designed, they can pump very high pressures, but the longevity of the pumps are improved when you're not pumping against the high pressure. So in pretty much all of these, that's not going to be the case. So hopefully that will also improve the longevity of how long they last.
Are the pumps made in China, by the way?
Oh, God. I hope not.
The main supplier of these pumps is a company called Environment One, and they're located in upstate New York. Now, where they get the components from, I couldn't tell you, but they are located in New York State.
I think you have one more question in the back. There's a behind Will. There's a woman in the back with a question.
Sorry if this is a late question, but can you please explain why the number of parcels changed from, I don't have the figures right in front of me, it was 400 and something houses, parcels, now it's 300 and something? Like, did those people just suddenly decide, or that it wasn't feasible anymore for those parcels, those homeowners? What happened there? How did that come to be?
Well, the process predates my tenure with the town, but I believe what went on was looking at the areas that were most cost effective to serve. The other reality that the town had to deal with is that the $10 million from the East of Hudson Fund could only go so far. That the more people we spread that $10 million out across, the more parcels we do that, the less of an impact it has on the price. So if we included more people, once we, take what it's going to cost and subtract the $10 million, instead of being $800 a year, it may have ended up being $1,100 a year. So that was, I think, part of the calculus that went into the decision to take some properties out. Those properties will likely be revisited in the future. So we sort of, this is our proposal for now, and we'll revisit those. And there's other properties that aren't in Hallock's Mill, and the town has been through this process many times to do this. And as people show interest in having their neighborhood sewered, we work with them, and if we can facilitate making it happen, we will. So that's where we are now. People wanted to see this happen, so this is the plan. We're moving forward, and hopefully if all works well, quite a few people will benefit from this improvement.
In the original proposal, which was like 2 years ago roughly, next door to the building, it was proposed that the Sparkle Lake District was going to be on low pressure, which was calculated at roughly 15,000, and gravity fed was calculated at roughly like 5,000 or 6,000. And and it was 14.3 million, $10 million grant, 4.3 that was going to be tossed around between all the 315 parcels that would have to pay an $800 bond for $800 a year bond for 20 years. If you got the 1.2 million, why would it still be $800?
Well, the issue is that we started we weren't going to supply the pumps. That was originally what was represented to me.
I read that. The county
So the county said, you've got to supply them. Right. So we had to revisit the numbers when that happened, and now we're sort of, hopefully we can reduce that number, because I'm going to really do my best to eliminate a lot of those pumps, which will ultimately reduce our costs. And the additional funds we got hopefully will help us with the cost escalation that's been going on during this period. We've been waiting for the $10 million. Ideally, we should have been doing this in the beginning of 2020. But here we are. We finally got the commitment on the $10 million, and now we can move forward.
With my house, which we spoke about earlier, you gonna try to dig down to see how deep you can go, or when would that process take place to see when you can potentially take my house or other people's houses off of low pressure and potentially do gravity? When would you possibly do that?
Well, there's two questions here. Whether, when will we know whether we can take this gentleman off the low pressure pumps? First off, we're going to try to do gravity up in the Sparkle Lake neighborhood as best we can. The depth we go, there's some practical limitations to the cost associated with going super deep in somebody's house is much lower than the road. But the other part of that would be we can do a better cost estimate once we start doing borings and see what the depth to rock is. And that obviously impacts going deeper. So, there's we really need to value engineer this thing, which there's a lot of moving pieces, depth to rock, getting rid of pumps. So all those different things we'd be evaluating really won't be known until we have the consultant on board and really know a lot more than we do now. Then we could really, hone in on these prices, and I will know a lot more when we put the project out to bid, which may be in multiple bids, but certainly when that first bid goes out, we'll know how we're doing.
If we are on the $8,000 side or the higher side of $10,000, do you have to pay that all at once?
You talking about the hookup charge?
Not the hookup charge. I know I got to pay the plumber to hook up from the street to the house. I get that. But the cost that the town is telling us $8,000. If you're on a pump, it's supposed to be around $8,000 roughly. But if you're gravity fed, it's supposed to be around $6,000. That bill, that $6,000 bill, is that going to come out of your taxes over the year?
No, that's your connection charge. I mean, you could opt not to connect. So if we leave, the gentleman was asking about the $8,000 charge to hookup. That's obviously on the homeowner, and you'd be paying that if you elected to connect. If you elect not to connect, then you're not going to incur that cost.
So that's the estimated charge to connect from the house to the street. And obviously, if you're closer to the street, it could be a little less.
Everyone's a different scenario. I mean, it's the people could have rock in their yard. They could, there's so many different scenarios. But I think some people maybe get it done for less. But I think people ought to just figure that's kind of what you're looking at.
And if you are, so my pipe comes out on the back side of my house, and if I am gravity fed, is it possible to have that pipe go out, make a left and a right, still being gravity fed, or is it a straight run?
I don't know the answer to that. I won't know it until we get into the weeds on this.
Okay.
But are you saying that aside from the hookup from the house to the street, is there any other charge, immediate charge that you would pay?
That would be out of pocket, yes. The actual connection from your home to whatever we leave for you. Right.
Other than the
and we would leave the pump if that's the scenario you're in. Yes, ma'am.
Will the homeowners get, something in writing to this? We're just throwing out numbers here. When is these parcels going to be notified? Hey, this is the actual cost of what all of these things are going to cost. Because I just hear numbers thrown out, isn't that reasonable to be more specific and let people know how much it's really going to cost them?
The question is about the actual cost. For clarification, are you talking about the cost of connecting or the cost of the overall project?
Not the overall project, but each individual homeowner, their cost and their share and what,
There's 310 properties involved here. Every one of them is going to be a different story. And everyone, depending upon the situation, is going to get a different price. And we're trying to just put a reasonable price out there for budgeting. In the past, one of the things we've seen neighborhoods do, which, when we get to that point is something to consider, is groups of neighbors get together and say, you know what, I'm in, let's call a plumber and see if he'll come in and do 10 of us. Because now there's a sort of efficiency, because he shows up, he's got a backhoe, and he gets done with your house at 2 o'clock. At 2:30, he could be at your neighbor's house, work a couple hours, come back tomorrow, and just keep going. So there's a certain efficiency to negotiating with a plumbing contractor to do a number of homes. And not everyone's going to get the same price, but it makes a lot of sense to do that. So that might be something to consider when we get to that point. And if you have a plumber come to your house to do another repair for some reason, have a conversation with them about how we would do it and what does he think it'll cost.
So, ma'am, eventually, on Tuesday, we actually need to create the sewer district. It doesn't even exist yet, right? So on Tuesday, we're going to create the sewer district, and then what's going to happen, we have to send it to New York State Controller. We'll have to send it to the Controller in New York State. They're going to give us final approval. They might come back with some questions. We're going to go through that process. Once that process happens, then we're going to move into the next phase where we hire a consultant. And then that consultant is going to figure out what each house is going to cost, what the cost is going to be associated, for you and for anybody else that wants to hook up. As far as the connection cost, which is, I think, what you're talking about. Your individual charge that's going to, and then you're going to be notified of it before anything happens. But we're nowhere near that. We don't even have the sewer district yet. And that's why what they're trying to do is they're trying to give you a reasonable kind of ballpark figure. Don't hold us to it, because we don't know. We're not even at the point where we have somebody, a professional that came in and said, okay, you're going to be this much, you're going to be this much, you're going to be this much. So we're just trying to give you some answers to the big question, how much, and we're trying to give you a ballpark figure. But yes, absolutely, you will know exactly what it's going to cost you for the connection. As soon as we know it, we'll let you know it, and then you make the decision whether you want to connect or not. Right? So yes, the answer to the question is yes. It's still very early in the process, though.
Thank you, Councilman.
Did I take
100% took everything I was going to say, but that's okay. But I really just wanted to thank Dan Ciarci. He's going to stick around, so if you have more questions about your specific properties, he can answer them. But to Councilman Esposito's point, this is reintroducing where we're at to all of you. We can't get to your specific property and the cost of your specific property until we establish the district. We can't establish the district until we have our public hearing on Tuesday. And we can't move beyond those steps. Or once we get beyond those steps, then it goes to the state comptroller. So there's still steps until we get to your specific answer, but it will come. And that's one thing I think this whole process will provide at the right point in time. I know it can be a little frustrating and a little uneasy, but right now the focus is establishing the special district, which is going to be done on Tuesday through the public hearing. You are all welcome to come to Town Hall, whether you're for or against, whatever it may be. And then, again, this is part of the process to establish that special district. Once the special district is established, then it moves over to the comptroller's office, as we said before. So we still have a number of steps to go. I just want to reiterate the fact that a lot of things you heard tonight are the things that you heard 2 years ago next door, because it's the same project. And it's the same project because we didn't want to have to go back through the petition process and all the steps that so many of you have taken to get us here. So we really do appreciate everyone's time. Again, we're going to be sticking around for a little bit, so feel free to, we can talk specific about your property if you want, or you have more questions for Dan. He'll be sticking around as well, but I really just wanted to thank you all for coming out. I hope it was helpful. I hope it helped re-educate you on what this project's about, where we currently are, where we're going to be, hopefully after Tuesday, and what the plan is, at least for the next six months to the rest of the year. But it's all positive, like I said earlier. It's great to be in this position. It's great to be able to look everyone in the eye and say, hey, we've got a written commitment from the County of Westchester for $10 million. No one's ever been able to do that before. So we were closer than we've ever been. And again, to Congressman Jones, we thank him for his efforts in obtaining an additional $1.2 million. But this is something I think that is great for the community, something that people, again, have been waiting for decades. And we're really, really close. So we, again, want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank our town engineer. I want to thank our entire engineering department for being out here tonight. And again, we're going to be here, so feel free to come up and ask us some questions if you have more that we didn't get to tonight, okay? And again, Tuesday, 7:30, over at Town Hall. Everyone's welcome, and we hope to see you there. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, just real quick, folks. I happen to locate, believe it or not, on YouTube. It's grinder pump installation. It's a 2000 series, the E1 grinder pump station. So if you want to look up how they're installed, et cetera, you can get that on YouTube under E1 grinder pump installation.